You made a good point because in a lot of the coding tutorials, the people who in a lot of them, all of them, they've coded it out before. And so they're just basically copying their code. And so what you end up seeing in these coding tutorials most of the time is not how you would actually code a project. Like they're just
Yeah.
literally writing it line for line. So like they're putting in all the CSS and everything before they've even put the element on the screen to know what
Yeah.
it looks like normally. And it just doesn't make sense because you're like, how could you know that that's supposed to go there? Like these guys must be wizards. I could never do
Yeah.
that.
That's how I used to feel too, right? You feel stupid because it's like it seems like they can just code out a whole project like with no mistakes, no issues, and you're not seeing any of the real process. And like you said too, I think that's the worst thing too. It's out of order. It's not how a regular developer would
Yeah.
approach it. And I think that's a huge problem because then you end up not knowing how to do this yourself. Because if you're new and you try to like start connecting everything right away, it's gonna be so many bugs and so many issues because you don't know what you're doing. But they
Mhm.
do, and it's like, and also you don't really necessarily do projects like that. Depends on the project.
Yeah. One
Yeah.
thing, one thing that I've taken from doing a lot of the hacking stuff is kind of when I go through something that I didn't understand the first time, doing it again. And I think that can also be applied to coding tutorials. So like let's
Oh
say
yeah.
you go through a coding tutorial and it just seems like something completely out of like you don't understand it at all. If you try going through it again, maybe on your own to see if you could do it, because I do that with a lot of these boxes when I have no idea what's going on. And so I'm like learning the first time through it, and then I go through it again, see if I can actually get through it on my own without referencing the notes to see if I could actually learn something from doing it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
The other thing I was doing too is I would take a tutorial that I did and then I'd make a new project modeled on it. So something different, but
Mm-hmm.
I'd follow along either with the tutorial or with the code as a guide and try to create something myself. And that was a good practice of like starting to put things together on my own and work through the design and stuff. I also think a really good thing too is adding something onto the, like whether it's like, you built the tutorial project and then you figure out how to deploy it, or you add a new feature to it that's totally unique and different and you struggle through that process. But something where you're doing it all on your own is really critical too, I think, in that
Yeah.
process.
I
Plus,
think
it
you
gives you a
guys,
unique thing to add to your portfolio as opposed to just
yeah.
the
Yeah.
same tutorial that everyone else has done. Yours is unique.
Yeah. I think you guys both make a good point. Good morning, Bryce. So I wanted to bring up something that happened actually this week inside of our web dev incubator program, which is one of our students, Charles, was like going through some Next.js tutorials. And I think he sort of felt a bit of like tutorial hell, right? Where he was like, I just did this JavaScript mastery tutorial. I spent like a long time doing it. And yet I don't feel like I actually gained anything from it. And so some of the advice I gave him was, and this is what I found myself doing a lot in the beginning too, was almost just following tutorials blindly, like hoping
Yeah.
that somehow by like, I don't know, like symbiosis or something, I'm going to learn stuff just by like writing it, which is
That does work.
helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I found was really helpful when I was learning was to actually break up these tutorials because like a lot of times like a JavaScript mastery tutorial is 5 to 8 hours long, and if you just code that from beginning to end and then try to go back through all of that code, it's really tough to see like the progress of what happened. So what I found that really helped for me was doing maybe like a half hour of coding, maybe an hour, and then go back and look at that piece of code and see if I can go line for line and explain what's going on in here. Because a lot of times, like what you had said, the coding tutorials are done already. So the complexity of like working through logic has already been done.
Yeah.
And so you're just coding it like at the speed of light a lot of times with tutorials too, because they don't want to make them 20-hour long tutorials, right? But the reality is it takes a long time to code out a big project. So it is helpful sometimes to just break that up and go back every half hour. And what like you really have to focus, especially in the beginning, if you don't understand something, your goal is to figure out what is going on there. So if you're reading it and you're like, I don't know what this is, don't just pass over it. You need to actually like go and look up some MDN docs or whatever package you're using, those docs, and see, okay, what's actually happening here? Because that's where the learning happens.
You actually remind me of something too. Hold on. I want to go because I already thought of this before and I don't want to
Hey
forget it.
guys, don't
Yeah.
fight, don't
This
fight.
is something I thought of actually a while ago. I didn't want to forget for today, and I'm glad I remembered. You know, I think one of the things you can get from just writing out this code and doing like what you said is a really good idea. I used to do that too. Even using
Yeah.
like AI if you need to help explain it.
Yeah.
But learning to see the connections, like why are things being done?